I am in Central Park, Dagenham today, which is in Essex, UK, and I am preparing for my A2 CofC, or Certificate of Competency Self-Assessment. Today I'm going to perform a range of manoeuvres with my DJI Air 3S drone, which weighs 724 grams. In Central Park today, there's patchy sun, some clouds, as you can see, with a little bit of wind, which is not too bad. And today I'm going to perform a range of manoeuvres. I will also add that I am more than 150 meters away from buildings. There's a few trees around the perimeter and the occasional person which I will avoid flying over or getting near to. So the first maneuver I'm going to do is an automatic takeoff and automatic landing with a hover in between, and then after that I will do a manual takeoff and a manual landing with a hover in between and a little bit of movement. Fortunately today there's not too much wind, so the drone isn't drifting too much around. I should also note that I'm currently in sports mode on my remote controller, so the obstacle avoidance sensors and amongst other things are currently disabled, so it requires quite a lot of manual control, but nonetheless I will be, or I should mention that I will also be trying to maintain visual line of sight as much as possible, apart from the occasional remote controller task that I might need to do via the screen. So here's a manual takeoff and landing with a hover.
Takeoff. Home point updated.
Okay, so next I'm going to do some basic flight movements at controlled and constant speeds, slow, medium, fast, beginning with horizontal, so left to right, then linear, back and forwards, my altitude, so up and down, and generally performing in a straight flight at a constant altitude, the latter of which I will do first in order to get the drone farther away from the landing pad. And again, as always, I'll be in sports mode.
Take off.
And to add, I will also be around between 1 meter to 2 meters above the surface.
Home point updated.
So I'll raise my altitude. Okay, so first I will do the horizontal movement, left and right. Because there's a dog nearby, I will raise my altitude so as not to be a nuisance to the dog, but also to avoid any potential damage. and then medium speed. And then fast. And now I'll recenter and maybe lower my altitude as well now that the dog is far away. Okay, so next I will fly forward maybe about 15-20 meters and then back, beginning with slow, then medium, then fast movements. Medium. And then fast. I'll probably do that once more, maybe lower my altitude. I think with the wind, it's affecting the altitude above the surface. Might need to increase the altitude. Okay, once more. Maybe it was too close to the ground. Okay. Okay, so next I'm going to do a mix of movements, a change in direction, speed and altitude, but basically flying to a point where the drone has become indistinguishable at a far distance, and then performing an automatic return to home. So the automatic return to home I will need to do via the screen. As you can see, I've got a strobe on the back, but I believe it's probably run out of battery, which is probably a good thing for this task, which will make it even more difficult to see.
Max altitude reached.
So as you can tell, my remote controller is set to allow the drone to fly up to a maximum of 400 feet or 120 meters. And it might occasionally remind me that I can fly up to a maximum of 120 meters or 400 feet. So right now, I'm just flying somewhat randomly in the air, picking a spot to where my drone is a little difficult to see, but because today is reasonably clear up in the sky, apart from the clouds, it's a little easier to see the drone. I find that the drone is a little more difficult to see amongst the blue areas of the sky where there's no clouds, compared to when it's in, between me and the clouds. So right now it's sort of at a distance where it's a little tricky to see, but not too bad. Nonetheless, I'm going to do an automatic return to home through my remote controller. And what I've found from my limited experience is that
Return to home.
if I take my eyes off the drone whilst it's up in the air, the visual line of sight, look at my screen or away and then back at the drone, it is in fact very difficult to try and relocate visually where the drone is when looking at it directly. So right now I'm doing a automated return to home. Let's see if it finds the landing pad. If it doesn't, I might nudge it a little in the right direction so it avoids the grass.
Landing.
Okay, not bad. Right, this time I will do the same thing. I'll fly to a location in the sky that makes the drone indistinguishable or difficult to see, and this time manually return to home, so using no automated functions on the remote controller, and therefore not looking at my remote controller during this process.
Takeoff. Home point updated.
Take it to perhaps a slightly different location away from urban areas and more sort of centrally towards the park. I'll increase altitude. I'm nearly at 400 feet.
Max altitude reached.
There we go. Fly around a little. Okay, this time I will slowly return it to home manually. There we go, it's coming. I had to check my screen for a moment because it was so close to a tree that it was difficult to make out whether the drone was facing towards me or away from me. The last thing I wanted to do was obviously fly into a tree, so I was making use of that, so this experience makes it is a good example or a good reason why you need to keep your eye on the drone at all times. I think the other thing is I was actually flying very slow, so it was difficult to determine where I was going, left, right, forward or backwards. There we go. I think the drone is somewhat affected by, could potentially be affected by the ground. So when I was trying to position above the landing pad, directly above the landing pad, it was making sort of jolty movements. Okay, so that concludes the flying to a indistinguishable location, automated and manual return to home. Okay, so I had to swap out my strobe light as the other one had run flat earlier, and also I wanted to perform some maintenance checks, a couple of which was the battery level on the remote. So it's currently at 68%, and the battery on the drone is at around 3/4, so I'm okay in that regard. I also wanted to check for any other recreational users in the park. There were some people walking about, some people with dogs as well, so we'll have to take some care there. Okay, so next I am going to do some control patterns where I will be trying to vertically maintain a stable altitude and heading whilst performing the following: a square, rectangle, circle, a rectangle with circular sides, figure 8, and some S movements. Whilst I do these, I will fly at approximately 2.5 meters off the surface, and I will do each movement in 3 ways. Firstly, inwards, and then outwards, and then in the direction that I'm facing. Okay, so beginning with a square, I will fly each side of the square at about 10 meters, give or take, beginning with inwards, and then outwards, and then in the direction.
Home point updated.
So I'm about 2 meters off the surface. Okay, so I'm going to do a square movement here, about 10 meters per side, give or take. I'll just move forward a little. I just need to check my screen just to occasionally just to see that I am actually flying, or compare how far I've flown with how far away it is from me, for example, to see if I am within that give or take 10 meter distance. Okay, so I'm going to go left. So this is flying left, and then this is whilst also facing in an inward direction. And then this time I will face upwards and do the same thing. in the same visual direction, but obviously flying to the right because I'm facing outwards of the square. This time I will try to also implement controlled movements at the corners whilst I turn. I think this is not going to be a perfect square, or none of these shapes are going to be perfect, but I'm also dealing with wind that is picking up a bit somewhat, and as you can see I'm going slowly. Okay, so there we go, that's the outwards facing square, and then finally in the direction of travel. Checked my remote controller screen just a small number of times just to see how far away I am, or to see how far the drone is away from me, I should say. But I am trying to keep visual line of sight at all times if possible. Okay, so this time I'll face away from me again. This time I'm going to do a rectangle, so two of the sides will be longer, facing inwards. So I will make the long sides parallel to me. This time I will face outwards and fly in the same visual direction. And then finally facing in the direction of travel, third and final rectangle. Okay. This time I'll do a rectangle with two sides being curved, but in this case I'll just do a couple of movements, one being facing inwards and one facing in the direction of travel. So the perpendicular sides are the curved ones. I've just picked up the speed a bit as well. There we go. So that's the inward facing one, and then facing in the direction of travel. I think because my hands are getting a little cold, I'm going to in fact come back to my landing pad manually and just rest for a bit. Maybe have a hot drink just to rest. So here I am with my hot drink. I just realised I forgot to turn the strobe on before, but that's not to say I was necessarily relying on it, because I wasn't relying on it. But I'll turn it on nonetheless. It looks like I've got around 25 to 50% battery lift in this battery. I have a couple more movements at least that I want to demonstrate. One is the figure eight, and the second are some S-shaped movements in the sky, which will become apparent when I am up in the air. I did say earlier that I would do a rectangle, just a straightforward rectangle, but because I had already done a square, I hadn't seen much point in actually doing a rectangle. I thought that a rectangle with curved or circular sides would be more interesting and perhaps be a little more challenging. So I will do a figure eight. I will do a figure eight horizontally, but I will also attempt to do it vertically as well.
Takeoff. Home point updated.
Okay, so I'm going to do a figure eight horizontally to begin with, and I will start by varying in the left direction, trying to keep a somewhat constant altitude. Okay, so if I just come back. Okay, so next I will do a figure eight. This time, rather than doing the figure eight away and then to me, I will do it from side to side so it's easier to see from your perspective. I will just decrease my altitude a little. Okay, so I'll go forward, and by the way, I will keep looking in the same left direction, to my left that is. I find that figure eights are one of the more difficult movements to do, or difficult maneuvers to do. But I think with time it will become easier. It's just about coordinating the hand movements, finger movements, or control stick movements, I should say.
Battery level is low. Aircraft will return to the home point in 10 seconds.
So as you can see, battery's low, it will return home shortly.
Return to home.
So it's already initiated a manual return to home, sorry, an automatic return to home, but I will instead cancel that, or have cancelled that already, and will manually fly it back. Okay, there we go. So the battery on the battery on the drone has already reached below 10%, hence the automatic recommendation to return to home. So I will now swap out the battery. Okay.
Home point updated.
Checking my remote controller, I'm still at about 50 to 75%, and now on a full drone battery. So this time I will do some S movements. So I will do that at about a 2.53 meter altitude.
Takeoff.
Okay, so I'll do some S movements where the straight travel is parallel to my takeoff point, and each time I reach an end point I will make a turn. So I've already done one turn. Now I'll do a second turn. I'll probably do a maximum of 4 turns, and then I'll repeat the same thing but come back towards me. So now I'll come back. Just a reminder, I still, like I always have the remote controller on sports mode. So I have to take care with my control stick use. Any big movement will make the drone jolt more in the air than I want it to. I think I probably did one too many curves, but I think that's okay for the purposes of this self-assessment. There we go, come back. There we go. So right now I'm doing some free flying in the air. I've noticed that there's an aircraft above me, so I'm just trying to maintain a safe distance away from that. If I pan up on my camera, I may see that. So as you can see, there's a few things going on. Not only are there recreational users, there are aircraft in the sky. I'm at about 36 meters high, about nearly 60 meters away from me. Currently looking at a fireman, most likely doing some drill at the nearby Dagenham fire station, maintaining a safe flying distance whilst I'm observing him or her. I can pan in to see them slightly somewhat up close, with central London as a backdrop.